Hey everyone, so the other day I was landing on tarmac and kind of slipped and fell to my knee. It was mostly uneventful, but I did kind of go and scrape the leading edge of my hoop here and got a nice scrape and gouge up at the front of it. Didn't actually break anything and not really much harm. I've flown with it a bunch of times since then. But I'm going to show you how that we can fix this so that you can't even tell. And it involves just a little bit of work, a little bit of sanding. And let's get to it. All right, so you can see here there are just some gouges, some scrapes here. There's no real damage to the carbon fiber underneath. Some of these we could just sand down, but I'm going to show you how to actually build this up and reshape it so it looks just like new. I've seen other crashes before where there have been like some really deep gouges. In fact, I had one myself when I was just learning, where it's a big gouge, you know, all the way down the hoop here as I got dragged over some tarmac. And I was able to patch it and repair it this way to the point that I can't even tell which hoop section it is. So even though this damage is kind of light here, we can do this on a lot more damage as long as the carbon fiber hasn't been ripped. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is just take some 220 grit sandpaper and just smooth out some of the rough edges and clean it up a little bit, so that way we have a good surface to start putting some epoxy on. We're just going to sand it a little bit until it feels kind of a little more smooth and not so jaggedy, but not really do too much. Some of the lighter scratches I'm not even going to sand at this stage. So as you sand, sand a little bit and feel it a little bit. Just kind of go back and forth. We've sanded it down a little bit. It's a little smoother. Of course, now we're going to have a little bit of dust in here. We'll clean that up in a second. Throughout this process, we're going to use a lot of water, so make sure you get a nice spray bottle like this so that it's easy to squirt and easy to refill. So next we're just going to kind of clean up the area a little bit. We just kind of irrigate it and get all the dust out that we just created. For the light cracks, well, we can just start sanding and polishing, but for anything that's got a little depth to it or is rough around the edges, we're going to go and fill it with some ClearWeld 5-minute epoxy. This stuff's made by Weld, but it's a 2-part epoxy, kind of in 2 tubes here, where we'll squirt some out, mix it up, and we'll paste it on. All right, my camera didn't record when I was doing this, so I'm going to try to reenact it for everybody here. So we're going to squirt some into this little portion cup I got from a restaurant supply store. These are very handy for here because I don't mind throwing them away. Get the cap back on. All right. And then we're going to mix it with the popsicle stick that I got from a local craft store by the 100. Make sure to mix this up really well and spend a little extra time so you're absolutely sure it's fully mixed. And what we're going to do is going to use this popsicle stick like a paintbrush and just kind of paint it over all the gouges and cracks here. You can see I've already done this, but we're just going to kind of use the popsicle stick like a paintbrush, and as you see, it actually kind of goes away and fills all the cracks here. For some of the really smaller cracks, actually take your finger in a glove here, get a little epoxy there, and just kind of rub it in. Get it kind of smooth so you don't have to sand too much a little later. All right, and you can see there's one scratch here. It looks like I didn't prepare very well, and it's not filling very nicely. So I'll come back a little later and go and fill that. So these were all scratches and gouges all the way up here, and you can see that they've mostly disappeared. The cure time is very temperature dependent, so I'm going to go get a little room heater and point some warm air on here so it cures pretty fast. Well, it took a couple of hours. It seems like the epoxy is mostly cured. Let's go and check out how it looks. All right, you can see, at least on first glance, it looks like all the scratches are gone. We have this one right here that I'm not exactly sure what happened with this one, but we'll sand that down and make another pass at it. If you look closely, you might be able to see some of the ripples from the epoxy, and we're going to go and shape all of that after we get this last scratch fixed here. But it's all really hard. It feels like hard plastic. It doesn't feel tacky at all anymore, so we're ready to sand. As we sand here, we use some 220 grit sandpaper and plenty of water. The water's going to keep everything really irrigated, keep the dust out of there, and also keep the sandpaper clear. As you can see, I sand here. My scratch is kind of starting to go away. All right, mostly gone. We're going to dry it up so we can see what we did here. It's kind of hard to tell when it's wet. All right. Actually looks pretty good here, but I may want to do just another little coat of epoxy over here before we do the final finish. Mix up some more epoxy. Nice and mixed up. All right, now let's just coat right over where we sanded down that last scratch. Kind of like a paintbrush. Try to get it smooth so we have to sand off less later. Now it's time to let that cure. So we got the heater positioned a little better this time, so this actually cured pretty hard here just in an hour or two. Feels pretty rock solid. And now the more labor intensive part where we're going to go and sand this all down for shaping. One of the first things I'm going to do is, I don't know if you can see the Scout logo right here. It's in it's kind of in high polish, and I don't want to sand that off. So I'm going to cover that with some packing tape here, just so I don't sand over it. Because our final solution is not going to be high polish. It's going to be kind of a matte finish. All right, so we're going to do the bulk of the shaping here with this 220 grit sandpaper and a lot of water. This one doesn't necessarily say it's wet dry, but it holds up pretty well for me. And we're going to do a lot of feeling the surface and shaping it, and then feeling it, irrigating it to make sure we get it all the way we want. I can feel some roughness here from my from the epoxy. So now we're going to go in and sand it until it feels nice and smooth. Anywhere where it's a curved surface, I'm just going to use my fingers. If it's a flat surface, then I'm going to use a sanding block. It'll start off leaving kind of a white residue, and then as you get closer to the bottom, you'll start getting a little bit of black residue. That'll know you that you're getting close, and you should be very careful because you're kind of getting a little bit of the carbon in it. But it's still okay to proceed. And periodically as we get through here, we're going to want to dry it and take a good look and see how our progress is. Then you can kind of see some of the relief of the shape, maybe some of the inconsistencies you need to sand out. All right, that took about 20 minutes. Just going back and forth, sand, feel, water, sand, feel, water, and dry it and take another look. You can see anywhere where you sanded, it has kind of a matte finish to it. So you want to make careful not to over sand your area so that you don't have to polish up more, but it's looking pretty good. It feels pretty good. And now we have to get to the polishing step. Then we're going to go and progressively sand this up to a 3000 grit. Maybe we're going to go with a 400, 600, 1000, 2000, 3000. And so we want to be very cautious of what was sanded before, so we sand that much plus a little bit more with each progressive grit of sandpaper. Now we're going to use some 400 grit sandpaper, and it's easier to see where you need to sand while it's dry. So I just go from the bottom up. That way any water I spray goes down and doesn't cover where I'm going. So let's get it going. We don't need to do an intense sanding job here. We're just trying to smooth out the sanding marks from the previous grit of sandpaper. So just try to get in some circles and just cover all the area that you had before, keeping it wet. That'll make your sandpaper last longer and make your results smoother. All right, the 400's looking pretty good. It's time to move on to 600 and on up. All right, that's 600. Time to move on to 1000. All right, time to go to 2000. All right, time for 3000. At this point, we're not completely done, but we're getting really close. Before we proceed, get out a flashlight and inspect your work to see if there's anywhere you need to kind of touch up or kind of go back and resand from 220 all the way, or maybe 400 all the way back to 3000. We've got it all sanded, and it looks really smooth and it feels really smooth. You can still kind of tell everywhere we sanded it, just kind of looks a little dry. And so now we're going to do our final step. Instead of polishing it like you would like a car repair, that's going to get it really shiny, which is how the Scout logo looks here. We don't want to do that. We want it to kind of just be a little bit of a sheen to it. So instead we're going to kind of polish it with a little bit of wax instead. So I like to actually use this beeswax mixed with like petroleum jelly. It's a hairstyling wax, but you can use like a paste wax for wood finishing, or even I think like car wax, like a turtle wax can work on here too. So now I'm just going to take some wax, put it on a paper towel here, and then we're going to kind of finish polishing it with the wax. We're going to rub it in circle motions, just like Mr. Miyagi told us to.
Wax on, right hand, make a circle. Wax off, left hand, circle.
All right, if you're using a car wax, you probably want to let it dry and then buff it out. But with this wax, I'm just going to get some dry paper towel and just kind of just wipe up the excess. It's looking pretty good. So there's a couple little imperfections, but they're pretty small. But all the big scratches are gone, the big gouges are gone, and it looks pretty good. There you have it. We repaired all of the scratches and scrapes and gouges out of my Scout Carbon paramotor to the point that the casual observer won't even notice. It's pretty easy to do. Just remember, if you have a proper, some proper damage in your carbon fiber, you should do an actual carbon fiber patch repair, which won't look completely as transparent. But this stuff looks pretty good, and no one has to know that you scraped your paramotor on the tarmac there, unless of course you put that on YouTube. All right, thanks.